afternoon, everyone. My name is Sophia Rowland, and I am a Senior Product Manager here at SAS, responsible for the solution SAS Model Manager. And today I want to do a quick overview of the responsible AI capabilities that we have available today in SAS Model Manager, which is our solution for machine learning model operations. SAS Model Manager is a leading solution in MLOps, and you don't have to just take my word from it. Here is our results from our most recent analyst evaluation, and you can see us up in the leader quadrants. And if you do swing by the ModelOps booth later, I can get you a virtual copy of that evaluation, but we came out as having three key differentiators. One is in performance and scalability, the second is in AI governance, and the third is in automation. And for our session today, I really want to dive into AI governance. If you're not familiar with SAS Model Manager, it has 5 key capabilities. First, we unify your modeling assets and your models into an easy-to-find, searchable repository. Second, we can test your models inside of SAS Viya and outside of it to make sure that it is working as expected before it is used for production workloads. Third, we can deploy models in minutes to a variety of destinations. We can deploy a model so that it is executing against the data in batch. We can deploy a model so that you have a REST API endpoint exposed so that you can incorporate it into other applications or services. And we can deploy our models into containers that you can leverage outside of the SAS Viya platform. We can monitor our models for decay. All models decay, meaning that they will become less accurate over time, and it's important to know when that model is no longer accurate so that you can refresh that model and put a new model into production. And fourth, we have the ability to build out automated processes for how your models should be used. And for each of these 5 areas, we can map into something you can do today to be behaving more responsibly with your models. The first is our model card, which is a nutrition label for your models so that you can understand your model health before you start using it for production workloads and to check up on it over time. Of course, you should be testing your models before they go into production to make sure that there won't be any errors when your model gets into production. Now, model publish locking is how you start to expose that model to receive traffic, and you may not want that model to be deployed by just anyone, or you may not want that model deployed until a specific point in the process. So through model publish locking, we can prevent that model from going into production until your predefined process is completed. We have performance monitoring, where we can monitor changes in the input distribution, the data for the output distribution, performance monitoring, and just brand new as of March, we now have fairness and bias monitoring as a part of performance monitoring report so that you can use this information on changes in fairness and bias to determine when it is time to refresh your model. And we also have released the Trustworthy AI Lifecycle Workflow. This is a workflow based on the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. There is a version of this workflow that is now out of the box, bootstrapped into SAS Viya, as well as some open source work that you can leverage if you don't have access to SAS Viya. So for today's session, I want to just do a short vignette into each of these capabilities that you saw. I'm going to start with our model card, which was designed to be a nutrition label for models, providing the right data to make informed decisions about that model usage. The model cards are populated as we build and manage those models in SAS Viya. So let's just kind of walk through how easy it is to view it and put it together. I'm here in our Model Manager homepage, and I'm going to move down to my projects, and I'm going to open up my salary classification project and open my model card. This is the fully populated model card. You can see information about how the model performed during training and over time. You have information about how that model is intended to be used. You can see a summary of the training data as well. And if we keep scrolling down, we're going to see a summary of the model at the time of training. So you can see things like generalizability, how well does that model perform on unseen data. We also have a lot of different metrics here for that model's performance across the various different training, testing, and validation sets. You can see very interactive. Here is a confusion matrix as well as some model interpretability, so you can see how the model was performing or which variables were most important. This is our fairness assessment, so we look at how the model treated groups differently across prediction and performance bias. And then the model audit is our model over time. So to start filling out the model card, you come back here into the project, we go down to model properties, and we start with the model evaluation. And from here, you can actually see where those thresholds for determining how well that model is performing, what is the performance that we expect here in our KPI rules and our default training threshold metrics. So adding a KPI rule is pretty easy. We can look at model accuracy, fairness, and bias. Model usage is also here, so you can start to see and fill these information out. And the last piece is performance monitoring, and that is what's going to populate the metrics for the model audit. So I'm going to just jump ahead straight into performance monitoring so you can see how that data populated the model card. All right, before we jump into the performance monitoring results, I do want to pop over to the variables so that you can see that we have two variables here, assess for bias. They are not inputs to the model, they are not outputs from the model. They are simply variables that we want to assess for bias against our model. They do exist within the training and performance data set so that we can do that evaluation. And we're going to start here by looking at changes in the input variable distribution. And you can see charts like population stability index, feature contribution index. If we scroll down into the output variables, you'll see the changes in the output variable distributions. These are very helpful for understanding potential causes of decay or potential decay down the line. Here we have our performance monitoring charts. Here's our ROC curve. Oof, that looks awful. If you've seen an ROC curve, you know that if it's going down that diagonal there, that means that that model is not performing very well, and that is a sign of decay. We also see this in our other measures as well. You could see the misclassification rate near 50%. And again, brand new as of March, we now have fairness and bias monitoring as a part of our performance monitoring report. And you can see, is my model treating these groups differently in the prediction that it is giving these groups, as well as the performance on these groups. So we have various parity metrics available. We are looking at the distribution. We have a group unfairness index. And if we scroll down, we can actually look and see if there's any differences in the values for the prediction, for the performance, for each of these variables at each of these time points here. For example, this one, the charts, a lot of them have very similar scales, but we do see a distinct difference in the average prediction for a male versus a female, and especially in Q4. And so this is giving us some information we can leverage in deciding, do we want to keep using this model in production, or is it time to refresh the model that we have for our production model? All right, now let's talk about model testing. So we want to test our models before they get into production so that our IT, our MLOps engineering resources aren't sitting there confused as to why there are now errors in production. And I want to actually go into my home loan project because I did find a very interesting error in this project that I want to share with y'all. So if I go to my score test, I can see that my Python model had a red X, but I do have data. So if I check my log, I can see something very interesting here, and I know that's an eye chart, but trust me, it says future warning, errors equals ignore is depreciated and will raise in a future version using from the function to numeric. That is a pandas-based function. It's in line 97 of my score code. This gets me on the path of debugging what is the potential problem. So what I'm actually going to be doing is going back to the pandas documentation for the to numeric function, and I can see right there in bright orange, changed in version 2.2, ignore is depreciated. So this is just catching a warning in my code. I'm gonna go ahead and fix it now because I don't know if it's gonna cause potential errors down the line. What I can do is go back into my model, go into the model files, go into my score code, go down to line 97, find that to numeric function, and in fact, I am using errors equals ignore. I'm gonna just make a quick change to correct this. I could create a new model version before I make this change if I want to have that nice version history, but because this model wasn't working correctly in the first place, I'm just gonna go ahead and make that quick correction. click save. All right, now it's the moment of truth. I'm gonna go back into my project. I'm gonna go back and run that score test, and let's see if my change worked. Drum roll. We're running. All right, screen status. I still have my data and there's no error. So I can use these score tests to start digging into and making sure that my model is running as I expect it before it goes into production, and so I don't give my IT group headaches down the line. All right, so testing your model is important. You want to have these checks and tests in place before the model goes into production. Now, if you've used SAS Model Manager with SAS Model Risk Management before, you might be familiar with the concept of model publish locking. And essentially, for models that are managed in SAS Model Risk Management that are linked to Model Manager, you can't publish the models from Model Manager until there has been the appropriate approval in SAS Model Risk Management. But if you don't have SAS Model Risk Management and you have your own process that you want to build and define for how these models are validated, for tested, and improved before they go into production, you can use a tool that comes with SAS Model Manager called SAS Workflow Manager, and you can use that with our model locking APIs to prevent that model from going into production by locking it. So from Model Manager, I'm actually going to pop open my menu and go down to Manage Workflows. SAS Workflow Manager does come with Model Manager. It typically requires administrator rights. So what we see here is a very simple process flow that I've built out using SAS Workflow Manager. It consists of a user task. This is a task that you want an individual to complete, and I'm just specifying a specific group. Then I have a system task. This is a task that will be automated by the system. And so essentially this task will be the one that locks the model. The first user task is to select the model. Here's my model approval, and it's simply going to ask the user, do you approve this model from going to production? If they say yes, this exclusive gateway will send it to the unlock model system task. If they say no, it's going to sit in approval. Now this workflow is customizable. You can build it to match your process. The idea is to emulate that ideal process, and we're adding a little bit of teeth to it. So I go back into my project. I have a workflow tab, and I'm just simply going to start that workflow. And this will start that workflow. You can see it's in progress. I'm going to go to the task pane of SAS Model Manager, and that will be where my tasks, my user tasks, are surfaced. I'm going to claim the task, and for this one, I'm going to select my champion model. It is my ensemble model based on automated machine learning. I'm going to complete the task, and remember, the model I select is the one that's going to be locked. So I'm going to come back into Model Manager, and I'm going to attempt to publish this model just for fun. Now, I mentioned our publishing destinations earlier. Again, we can publish to containers, we can publish to batch destinations, we can publish so that we have a REST API endpoint exposed. The REST API endpoint that's exposed and saved on, hosted on SAS Viya is through the microanalytics service. So I'm just going to quickly try to publish this model here. Click publish, and it will fail. Because that model is locked, it cannot go into production until it is unlocked. I can go back to my task pane and see that there is that task to approve the model. I can claim the task. I'm going to select yes to approve this model, complete the task, and because I selected yes, this will go to that unlock task. So when I go and try to publish this model, I should have a much easier time. So I'm going to try back to the microanalytics service destination. I'm going to give it a nice, memorable name and publish. And it was successful. That model has been approved. So using things like the model publish lock in conjunction to Workflow Manager really starts to add some bite and teeth to your enforcement processes. Remember that SAS Viya also has some very robust access control rules, so if you don't want a particular user or group to deploy models at all, you can revoke those privileges, again, to make sure that your processes are enforced. Now for the last section, I want to dive back into Workflow Manager because not only can you build your own workflows, we do have workflows out of the box, including our Trustworthy AI Lifecycle Workflow. We created this workflow to map recommendations from the National Institute of Standard and Technology's AI Risk Management Framework to tasks within the analytics lifecycle. So if you go back into SAS Viya, you'll see Trustworthy AI Lifecycle Workflow, and we did spend a lot of time mapping out those tasks. So it is a very, very robust representation of the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. So we start by identifying different stakeholders that are involved in the process, including the model owner, our data scientists, our data engineers, our risk owners, our MLOps engineers, so that we have a clear representation of who has what roles and responsibilities. They start by providing documentation and their understanding of the project, and there are checks and balances here in place. Our model owner being the ultimate decision maker who decides whether or not what the other teammates have provided was representative. And you can see we have steps here for assessing the data. We have steps for assessing the model, selecting the champion model, testing and deploying that model, performance monitoring, which we saw earlier, and then a review of the project. And so if you are operating on the later versions of SAS Viya, you will find this workflow out of the box that you can go ahead and just get started from the workflow pane. And again, lots of really great automation that we baked in there. But we didn't think it was super ethical just to keep this in SAS Viya, so we wanted to open this up so that folks who are outside of SAS Viya can start to leverage some of the great knowledge that we put together for this. So we have the SAS Trustworthy AI Lifecycle Work project on GitHub. This is leveraging GitHub Pages to build a documentation page. So we can't automate all the steps, but we can help you think through the different steps and document them. And because this is in GitHub, we have really great version control backing it, so you can see who's added what changes at what time. And again, all of those steps we have just represented here in the GitHub Pages report. You can fork this project and start building out the documentation. And what's really nice is because it is in GitHub Pages, we do have a nice link that you can also use within for example, your Model Manager projects or your other projects as well. So I can just simply take that link and I can just add it to my project so that if I want particular folks to be able to find that documentation, it's all here in one place. And I save it. Ooh. All right, if you take anything away from this session, I hope you remember that for SAS Model Manager, we've put in a lot of work to have these responsible AI capabilities baked in at natural touch points in the process just to make it easier for you to use AI more responsibly. And there are a lot of really great sessions coming up on responsible AI as well. I know we're here in day one. I'll be doing another session tomorrow about taking models from SAS Viya Workbench and putting them into our unified repository model manager, but there's also sessions on bias detection in Workbench, and our folks from the data ethics practice will be giving a session on taking Python models from SAS Viya Workbench and building out that model card step by step in Model Manager. So there's a lot of great upcoming learning sessions. All right, I can take a few questions now. I think we have a few minutes, but if there's anything else that comes up, I'm going to be at the ModelOps booth for most of Innovate, so you can find me there. I'll be there with one of our fantastic data scientists named Mila, so please do stop by, but I can take a few questions now if anyone has any.
Just raise your hand and I'll bring over the mic if you'd like to ask any questions.
If there are no questions, I do think the bar is open.
All right, let's give it up for Sophia Rowland, everybody. Thank you so much, Sophia. Amazing presentation, as always.
Thank you.